Hi, I'm Rainbow Sparkle and I'm reading The Enchanted Wood by Enid Blyton, and this is chapter 5, The Roundabout Land. One big broad branch slanted upwards at the top of the faraway tree. Joe climbed onto it and looked down, but he could see nothing apart from white mist that swirled around and about. Above him, the enormous, thick white cloud stretched with a purple hole into it, through which the upmost top branch of the faraway tree disappeared. The children felt tremendously excited. At last, they were at the very top. Joe carefully pulled himself up the last branch. He disappeared into the purple hole, and Bessie and Fanny followed him. The branch came to an end, and a little ladder ran through the cloud. Up the children went, and before they knew what had happened, they were out in the sunshine, in a new and very strange land. They stood on green grass, and above them was a blue sky. A tune was playing somewhere, going on and on and on. It's a sort of tune on a roundabout, said Joe. Isn't it? It was, and then suddenly, without any warning at all, the whole land began to swing around. The children almost fell over, so suddenly the swinging around began. Good gracious, said Bessie, frightened. What's happening? The children felt terribly giddy, for trees and distant houses and hills and bushes all began to move around. They too felt themselves moving, for the grass was going around as well. They looked for the hole in the cloud, but it had disappeared. The whole land is going around and around like a roundabout, said Joe, shutting his eyes with giddiness. We've passed over the hole in the clouds, and we don't know where the upmost branch of the faraway tree is now. It's somewhere beneath this land, but goodness knows where. Joe, how can we get back home again? Cried Fanny in fright. We'll have to ask someone for help, said Joe. The three began to walk away from the patch of green field in which they were standing. Bessie noticed that they had been standing on a ring of grass that seemed darker than the grass around. She wondered why that was. But she had no time to say anything, for really it was dreadfully difficult to walk properly in the land, as it was going around and around like a proper roundabout all the time. And the music went on and on too. Hurdy-gurdy, hurdy-gurdy. Joe wondered where it came from and where the machinery that worked this strange roundabout land. Soon they met a tall man singing loudly from a book. Joe stopped him, but he went on singing. It was annoying. Hey diddle diddle, derry derry down, he shouted, whilst Joe tried to make himself heard. How can we get away from this land? Joe was shouting. Don't interrupt me. Hey, hey, diddle diddle, sang the man. He beat time with his finger, but Joe caught hold of the bony finger and shouted again. Which is the way out of this land? And what is it? Now you've made me lose my time, said the tall man crossly. I shall have to begin my song again. What is this land, please? Asked Fanny. It's roundabout land, said the tall man. I should have thought anyone could have guessed that. You can't get away from it. It goes round and around always, and it only stops once in a blue moon. There must have been a blue moon when we climbed into it, groaned Joe, because it certainly stopped then. But the man went off singing loudly. Hey diddle diddle, derry derry down, silly old dilly people, said Fanny. Really, we do seem to meet the most peculiar people. But I'm worried about us getting home, said Bessie. Mother will be so anxious if we're not back when we say that we were going to be. What shall we do, Joe? "Let's sit down under this tree and have a bit more to eat," said Joe. So they sat down and munched solemnly, hearing the roundabout music going on and on all the time, and watching the distant hills and trees swinging around against the sky. It was all very strange. Presently, a pair of rabbits lolloped up and looked at the children. Fanny loved animals, and she threw a bit of cake to them. To her surprise, one of the rabbits picked up the cake in its paw, nibbled it like a monkey. "Thanks," said the rabbit. "It's a change from grass." "Where do you come from? We haven't seen you before, and we thought we knew everyone here." "Nobody new ever comes to Roundabout Land." "And nobody ever gets away," said another little rabbit, smiling at Fanny and holding its paw out for a bit of cake too. "Really?" said Bessie in alarm. "Well, we are new to it, for we only came here about an hour ago. We came up the faraway tree." "What?" said both the rabbits at once, flipping up their long ears in amazement. "Up the faraway tree, you did say? Goodness, you don't mean to say that's touching this land?" "Yes, it is," said Bessie. "But I expect as this land is swinging around and around at the topmost branch, might be almost anywhere by now, and there's no way of finding it." "Oh, yes, there is," said the first rabbit excitedly. "If we burrow down a little way, we can make a hole, and we can see whereabouts the faraway tree is underneath, and we can wait for it to come around again when the land swings above it." "Well, we came up the tree just where the grass was rather dark from the rest. I noticed that," said Bessie. "Do you suppose that's where the roundabout land swings round, and it will come back to the same place again if we could slip through to the top branch?" "Of course," said the rabbits. "We can easily burrow down that green patch of grass and wait for the land to turn round just over the tree again. Come on, quickly, there's no time to lose." All of them jumped up and sped off. Bessie knew the way, and so did the rabbits. Soon they were back in the field where the ring of dark grass stood. There was no opening now, leading through the cloud down to the tree. It had gone, and the rabbits began to dig quickly. Soon they found the ladder that led upwards. Then they made such a big hole that the children could see down into the large cloud that swirled around at the bottom of the roundabout land. "Oh, there's nothing there yet," said the first rabbit, getting out a handkerchief and wiping his dirty front paws. "We must wait a bit. I only hope the land hasn't swung on and passed the faraway tree altogether." The roundabout music went on, and then suddenly it began to slow down. One of the rabbits peered out the hole below and gave a shout. "The land has stopped going round, and the faraway tree is just nearby, but we can't reach it." And the children peered through the cloud below and the ladder. They could see quite clearly that the faraway tree was very near, but not near enough to jump on. "Whatever do we do now?" "Now don't try and jump," warned the rabbits, "or you'll fall right through the cloud." "But what shall we do?" asked Bessie in despair. "And we must get on the tree before we swing away again." "I've got a rope," said one of the rabbits suddenly, and then he put his hand into his big pocket and pulled out a yellow rope. He made a loop in one end and then threw it carefully around to the top of the branch of the nearby tree. It caught and held. Good. "Fanny, slip down the rope first," said Joe. "I'll hold this end." So, rather afraid, she slid down the yellow rope to the tree, and then, just as she got there, the roundabout music began to play very loudly again, and the roundabout land began to move. "Quick, quick!" she shouted, as the land swung nearer to the faraway tree. "Jump, jump!" They jumped, and the rabbits jumped after them. The roundabout land swung off. The big white cloud covered everything, and the children and rabbits clung to the utmost branch and looked at one another. "We look like monkeys on a stick," said Joe, as they all began to giggle. "My goodness, what an adventure! I vote we don't come up here again. But as you may guess, they did.